A week passed on Everlight. Unlike Unity, which had quickly become a place of construction, schedules, and settlers, Everlight still felt wild, untouched. The faction spent the week doing exactly what they'd set out to do: exploring, surveying, learning, falling in love with the world. Every day brought something new. One valley contained trees whose leaves glowed softly at night, turning entire hillsides into oceans of emerald light. Another region held crystal caves where natural formations hummed when the wind passed through them. They discovered warm, freshwater springs hidden amongst rocky cliffs, fields of silver grass that rippled like water, forests where golden birds nested in the branches and sang songs unlike anything any of them had ever heard. Every location felt beautiful, every location felt important, and every location somehow made the world feel bigger, more alive, more real. The faction eventually narrowed dozens of possible settlement sites down to 3. Then 3 became 2. Then 2 became 1. The chosen location overlooked a massive valley approximately 15 minutes from Lyra Falls. The plateau sat high enough to avoid flooding. A river fed directly from the waterfall basin. Forests surrounded 2 sides naturally. Open plains occupied the third. The view itself was breathtaking. From the highest point of the plateau, settlers would be able to see the mist from Lyra Falls rising in the distance every morning. At sunset, the glowing water reflected across the valley like a river of stars. Aurora stood at the edge of the overlook while construction survey drones mapped the region. Plum stretched her arms wide dramatically. This, she pointed around herself, is ridiculously unfair. Ellie looked up from a datapad. What does that even mean? It means if I lived here, I'd never get any work done because I'd constantly be staring at everything. Aurora laughed. Fair. Mira nodded. The location scores highest in every category. Plum pointed at her. See? Nerd confirmation. Mira rolled her eyes. Pines simply smiled. The old Reaper stood quietly looking across the valley, watching, thinking. The sunlight reflected off his face. Aurora frowned slightly. Again. Something looked different, subtle, tiny, almost impossible to explain. His skin looked paler, not sickly, not enough for anyone else to notice. But Aurora had spent 4 years watching people survive, watching people deteriorate, watching people hide injuries. The change jumped out to her immediately. The others continued talking. Pine stared toward Lyra Falls, lost in thought. Aurora watched him for another moment before forcing herself to look away. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe she wasn't. Construction authorization was approved that afternoon. The first Everlight settlement officially entered development. Supply transports were scheduled. Survey teams were dispatched. The first wave of settlers would begin arriving within weeks. For the first time since winning the Eclipse, the future felt tangible, real. The girls celebrated with a small lunch overlooking the valley. Even Pine seemed relaxed, more relaxed than Aurora had seen him in weeks. At one point he laughed so hard at one of Plum's terrible jokes that he nearly choked on his drink. Everyone laughed, including him. Aurora smiled, then her smile faded, because immediately afterward, he turned away. Quickly. Too quickly. A hand covered his mouth. A cough escaped. Then another, then another. This time it didn't stop. Aurora immediately noticed. Nobody else did. Plum was still talking. Ellie and Mira were arguing about transportation routes. Pines had stepped several meters away, hidden by a large rock formation. His shoulders shook. Another cough, then another. Aurora quietly stood. Nobody noticed. She walked around the rock and froze. Pines leaned against the stone. One hand pressed against his chest. Blood stained his palm. Not a few drops. Not like before. More. Darker. Thicker. The old Reaper stared at it silently, then wiped it onto his pants, slowly, methodically, like somebody who had practiced doing exactly that. Aurora's stomach tightened. Pines looked up, saw her, and immediately smiled. Too quickly. Far too quickly. There you are. Aurora didn't smile back. The old Reaper's expression shifted slightly. He knew. She'd seen it. The silence stretched. Aurora looked at his hand, then his face, then his hand again. Pines casually folded his arms, hiding the evidence. Everything all right? Aurora stared at him. Is everything all right? The old Reaper laughed. A little too loudly. Course. You're coughing blood. Silence. Pines shrugged. Old injury. Aurora frowned. What injury? The old kind. She didn't laugh, neither did he. For a second, something uncomfortable passed between them. Then Pines reached out and gently nudged her shoulder. Relax, kid. Aurora continued studying him, the pale skin, the tired eyes. The way he seemed slightly thinner, slightly weaker. Just enough. Not enough for anybody else. Enough for her. Eventually, she nodded.
Not because she believed him. Because she knew he wouldn't tell her. Not today. The two returned to the group. The conversation continued. Nobody noticed anything, except Aurora. And now she couldn't stop noticing. To distract herself, she threw herself into exploration. The remainder of the afternoon took them deeper into Everlight's wilderness. The terrain gradually changed. The forest became denser, the vegetation stranger, brighter, more colourful. The air itself smelled sweet, almost floral. Plum immediately declared it her favourite region. That should have been a warning sign. Unfortunately, nobody listened, including Plum. The first flowers appeared roughly an hour later. Beautiful flowers. Massive, glowing blossoms attached to thick vines winding through the forest floor. Blue petals, silver centres. The plants seemed almost luminescent beneath the canopy. Even Ellie paused to admire them. Those are incredible. Mira immediately began scanning. Unknown species. Plum grinned. Friend. Pines raised an eyebrow. Everything isn't a friend. Plum pointed dramatically. Not with that attitude. Aurora smiled. For the first time all afternoon she felt herself relaxing. The flowers truly were beautiful, peaceful, gentle, almost hypnotic. Then Plum walked closer and immediately disappeared into a bush. The scream echoed through the forest. What the foo... Aurora spun. Ellie drew a weapon. Mira nearly dropped her scanner. The flowers weren't flowers. At least, not entirely. The vines exploded upward. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They wrapped around Plum's arms, legs, waist, pulling her toward the center of a massive hidden plant structure. The beautiful blossoms suddenly opened wider, revealing rows of thorn-like growths inside. The entire forest seemed to move. Heartvine. At least that's what Mira would later call it. At the time, it looked like a nightmare. A giant carnivorous garden. Aurora rushed forward immediately. A dagger flashed into her hand. She sliced through one vine. 3 more replaced it. Ellie joined her. Cutting, pulling, fighting. The more the vines were damaged, the more aggressive they became. The forest floor itself shifted. New tendrils erupted from the soil. Plum continued disappearing. Help! Mira was trying, desperately. Every scanner reading came back differently. The plant adapted too quickly. Aurora cursed. The situation was escalating fast. Then, a familiar squeak echoed behind them. Everyone turned. Meatball. The rootkeeper waddled past them, completely unconcerned. The little creature approached the enormous heartvine, stopped, then sneezed. Silence. Nothing happened. Aurora blinked. Plum continued being dragged away, then the plant suddenly froze. Every vine stopped moving, every flower closed, every tendril retracted. The entire organism began withdrawing into the ground, fast, like an animal fleeing a predator. Within seconds, the giant heartvine vanished. Plum fell face first into the dirt. The forest became silent. Everyone stared. Meatball looked around, sneezed again, then continued walking, as if nothing unusual had happened. Aurora blinked. What? Mira checked her scanner, then checked again, then again. The rootkeepers naturally produce anti-floral enzymes. Ellie stared. They what? They evolved specifically to regulate aggressive plant species. Plum slowly sat up, covered in leaves, covered in dirt, covered in humiliation. She pointed dramatically toward Meatball, hero. The entire group burst out laughing. Even Aurora, even Ellie, even Pines. The tension evaporated instantly. The journey home began shortly afterward. The sun was setting, the forests glowed gold, the valleys stretched endlessly beneath the evening sky. Meatball proudly marched at the front of the group, apparently unaware he had just saved everyone. Or perhaps fully aware. Nobody could tell anymore. Aurora walked beside Pines. Quietly. Neither spoke for several minutes. The old reaper watched the sunset. Aurora watched him. The cough. The blood. The pale skin. The exhaustion. The signs were there. Small. Subtle. But there. For the first time since noticing the blood a week earlier. Aurora felt something she hadn't felt before. Fear. Real fear. Not of enemies, not of challenges, not of the future. Fear of losing somebody she loved. Pines noticed her staring. He smiled softly. What? Aurora looked away. The old Reaper chuckled. You're doing that thing. What thing? The worried thing. Aurora frowned. I don't do a worried thing. Pines laughed. You absolutely do. She almost smiled. Almost. The old Reaper looked toward the setting sun, toward the distant mist of Lyra Falls visible across the valley, toward the world they were building, and for a brief moment, Aurora thought he looked sad. Not unhappy, not regretful, just somewhere far away, like a man looking at something he already missed. The feeling stayed with her long after the others started talking again. Long after Meatball received an official hero's welcome from Plum. Long after the stars appeared overhead. Because deep down, Aurora knew something was wrong, and for the first time, she wasn't sure Uncle Pines was going to tell her what it was.